The movie kicks off in the quiet little town of Homewood, Alabama, where a young man named Simon McNally hops off a bus and heads straight to a diner for a job interview. Inside, he meets the manager, who flips through his CV and immediately spots the obvious. Simon hasn't worked in a decade. She asks him about the long gap and whether he studied during that time. Simon explains that he wasn't studying or working. He was dealing with medical issues and spent much of those years in a hospital. As he speaks, the woman's eyes drift to the marks on his wrists. She clocks the self-harm scars, but before she can ask anything, he hides them. She keeps talking, but Simon begins drifting away, pulled into the mocking voice of a man inside his head. The voice tears him down, ridiculing him for not even being good enough for simple jobs, and the frustration starts to build. A server drops a stack of plates, the crash snapping him out of the auditory hallucination and into a visual one. He suddenly sees a man sitting where the manager had been. Overwhelmed, he blurts out something completely nonsensical, and then the hallucination vanishes. The manager reappears, politely letting him know they'll hold onto his CV and call if needed. Then we cut to Ed Dearman, a security guard, sitting in a campus cafeteria pretending to read a newspaper, all while watching a student steal food. Ed swoops in, cuffs the kid, and drags him to the campus security office. The guard inside looks shocked. Turns out Ed doesn't work there anymore. He used to, but he was fired a while ago. That hasn't stopped him from carrying a fake badge and protecting the campus from snack thieves. Ed proudly admits he sprayed the kid in the eyes with hand sanitizer, which is wildly dangerous, but claims he had no choice because the actual guard took away his pepper spray. The guard is horrified. On Ed's way out, he rambles about the new patrol bike locks being too easy to pick. The guard tells him it's not his job anymore and suggests he stay off campus entirely. To make matters worse, when Ed reaches the parking lot, he discovers a $50 ticket on his car for parking in a security-only spot. Later, Ed goes home, and while parking outside, he spots Simon going inside the neighboring house. Simon lives there with his older sister, Dee Dee, who pays all the bills because he struggles to manage daily life. She asks how the interview went, but the moment gets cut short by a call about their mortgage. Simon quickly reminds her she's late for class, dodging the question. Before leaving, she invites him to karaoke night on Saturday, but he declines, saying it's not really his thing anymore. At his doctor's appointment, Simon insists he's doing fine, even when the doctor asks about his hallucinations and word salad episodes. The doctor reminds him he previously mentioned feeling watched by people under his bed and in his closet, all linked to his paranoid schizophrenia. Simon claims the symptoms disappeared after switching meds, though we can clearly see he's lying. On his way home from the clinic, he witnesses a young woman being assaulted and forced into a van. The attacker's face looks blurred to him. He starts hearing a voice echoing inside his head, and gradually we realize it's his deceased father. The voice needles him relentlessly, insisting he's hallucinating and too weak to step in and help. The voice taunts him for freezing up and just standing there while the attacker gets away. Exactly the same way Simon did on the day he broke his sister's jaw. But this time, Simon runs toward the van and catches the license plate before it drives off. Then he rushes to Ed's house and begs for a ride to the police station. He tries to explain what he saw and that he needs help. Ed shuts him down aggressively, saying he's not a taxi service and openly dismissing Simon because of his mental health. He slams the door right in his face. So Simon walks to the station alone. His father's voice taunts him the entire way, calling him weak, mocking him for being a little girl who likes to sing, and triggering vivid hallucinations, his father's image appearing and bugs crawling under his skin. At the station, he reports the abduction and meets Detective Liz Glover. He describes the woman in detail, then the man's clothes and height, though he can't recall the face. He gives her the plate number, and she says they'll look into it. Before he leaves, she casually asks his birthday for the report. But after running his info, the detective learns Simon has a history of violent episodes and self-inflicted wounds tied to mental illness. That night, while Simon takes his meds, his father's voice keeps drilling into him that the police won't believe a word he says because he's crazy. Overwhelmed, Simon calls the detective to ask about the woman. She tells him they traced the license plate, and it belonged to a vehicle located hundreds of miles away, meaning it couldn't be the same van. Simon breaks down, insisting he knows what he saw, but she dismisses his report as another delusion. So Simon turns to his neighbor one more time. He knocks on his door, and Ed immediately tries to send him away, telling him to try another neighbor. But when Simon asks if he used to be a cop, Ed suddenly perks up, smiles, and lets him inside. Simon rambles out a quick word salad line, then explains he gets mixed up like that when he's excited. He tells Ed the police don't trust his statement, even with the plate number. Ed, thrilled for a chance to outsmart the cops, pulls out his laptop. He opens a license plate lookup site and suggests Simon may have misread a letter or number, and together they try variations, generating 5 possible plates. Ed promises to help just at the start, but when he tries to buy the reports, his credit card is declined. He announces they'll need a plan B, which turns out to be going to the Department of Motor Vehicles. Ed pretends to be the college's director of security and surveillance, waving his fake badge and introducing Simon as his assistant. The DMV worker doesn't buy a single word, and as she refuses to give them any information, Simon becomes overwhelmed, starts hallucinating, and has a violent outburst, forcing her to reach for the phone to call the police. So they bolt. Outside in the car, Ed accidentally calms Simon by clicking his pen over and over. Then Ed decides they need to go back to the spot where Simon saw the kidnapping. Meanwhile, the detective gets a report that Simon had a meltdown at the DMV while trying to obtain plate records with an older guy. At the scene of the abduction, Simon tells Ed the woman wore a short skirt and makeup. With that in mind, Ed starts questioning local sex workers, pretending to be a cop again, but the stunt ends with their pimps smashing up Ed's car. Finally, Ed admits he never believed Simon's story anyway. Heartbroken, Simon walks off to continue the search alone. But Ed eventually feels guilty and catches up with him, rejoining the investigation. They go to the college, where Ed blackmails his replacement campus security guard into getting plate info from a traffic officer. When they get the data, Ed explains that out of the 5 plate possibilities, only 3 are local and none belong to a van. So the van must have been using stolen plates, meaning one of those 3 cars must be missing its tags. They check several addresses and eventually trace one vehicle to Kurt's Auto Salvage. As they drive to the junkyard, Simon is tormented by his father's voice again. Ed asks what hearing voices is like, but Simon shuts down. He's tired of being misunderstood. Ed keeps pushing, so Simon flips on the radio and rapidly cycles through stations, creating a chaotic blast of sound that gives Ed a small taste of how overwhelming the hallucinations can be. Ed begs him to stop. At the junkyard, they ask the worker about the car, but he doesn't know exactly where it is and lets them look around. They eventually find the vehicle with its plates removed, confirming it was using stolen tags. But this only frustrates them further. Ed points out that there's no way to track who stole the plates. Simon gets distraught, then hears a scream, and rushes toward a nearby car, convinced the woman is inside. Ed stops him, insisting there was no scream. The voice in Simon's head taunts him again that he'll never find the girl and that he never had chance. Meanwhile, the detective questions the DMV receptionist about Simon's incident, obtains the security footage, and reviews it in the police station, trying to make sense of his unwavering belief that this woman was abducted. That night, during dinner, Dee Dee suggests a service that helps people like Simon find work. They can't keep living off her paycheck. She studies during the day and works at the salon only at night. He takes it as an insult and snaps that he'll get a job on his own. They argue, and Simon vents the resentment he's been holding in. She left him alone with their abusive father when she ran away. But she was only a child herself. Dee Dee leaves for work with both of them still stung. Meanwhile, Ed is suddenly attacked by the abductor next door. Simon sees it through the kitchen window and rushes to help. The abductor has already beaten Ed badly and is pointing a shotgun at his head, demanding to know who Ed's partner is. Simon appears, grabs a magic 8-ball, and throws it at the wall to distract him. Ed takes the chance to stab the man in the leg with a pen, and Simon grabs the shotgun. Together they disarm him, but in the chaos, Simon accidentally shoots the man in the face. Immediately, the voice in his head taunts him again, calling him dangerous, crazy, telling him he'll be locked up forever. Then, the abductor's phone rings, snapping him out of the hallucination. Ed apologizes for not believing him as Simon wipes blood off his face. They grab the phone and go to Dee Dee's salon so she could treat Ed. She's only a third-year nursing student, but she's better than nothing. Simon sneaks Ed into the back of the salon, and Dee Dee starts treating his head injury. A customer overhears Ed screaming and is understandably alarmed. Dee Dee lies, explaining it's just a waxing session. The client pays, but as Dee Dee takes the money, the client notices blood on her hand. Dee Dee rushes back and tells the men she has to stitch Ed's head wound because it won't cloth on its own. Meanwhile, the detective receives a call about a disturbance at Ed's house. Officers arrive, find the attacker's body, and see the mess. The detective issues a bolo for Ed's vehicle. Back at the salon, Dee Dee tries to convince Simon to go to the police with the abductor's phone. Ed agrees, but Simon is completely against it. He believes the girl will die before the police take him seriously. He begs Ed to check the phone. Ed finally gives in and looks through it. The phone contains only two contacts. They call the first one labeled K, and it goes straight to the voicemail for Kurt's Auto Salvage. Just then, officers arrive at the salon, responding to the report from the frightened client, who saw blood on Dee Dee's hand. But Dee Dee stalls them long enough for Simon and Ed to escape through the back and hop on a bus. The next day, the pair wait in Kurt's office and confront him. Ed hits him with a gun, ties him up, and demands answers. Simon then notices a wall clock concealing a hidden safe. Inside are several women's passports, including one belonging to Anya, who Simon recognizes is the missing woman. Simon starts hallucinating again, seeing his father tied to the chair instead of Kurt. He grabs pliers and begins torturing him for information. Ed tries to calm him, and the hallucination dissolves. Simon drops the pliers. Kurt mocks him for not following through, but Ed sprays him in the eyes with his sanitizer. He terrifies Kurt with the threat of losing his eyesight, and that fear finally forces the truth out of him. He spills that the abductor was part of a trafficking ring and that Anya was being punished for trying to escape. But he claims he doesn't know where she is. His job was to hold the passports and steal the plates. They don't buy it. Under pressure, Kurt finally reveals that he took the stolen plates to a house in the city and gives them the address, after Ed promises not to call the cops. Naturally, as soon as they leave, they call the police on him anyway, leaving the passports behind for the detective to find. At the address, as they approach the house, Simon suffers another breakdown. A hallucination of his father stands in their path, taunting him that he'll fail again. Ed calms him with the pen and then hands it over to him, so Simon can ground himself. Once Simon stabilizes, they break into the house. Ed finds application forms for 4 young women, likely all trafficking victims. They search everywhere, but there is no sign of the woman or anyone else. Unfortunately, they're too late. The 2 men sink onto the couch, defeated. Then suddenly, the abductor's mother appears on the stairs, sees them, and bolts. They're baffled. Where on earth did she come from if they already checked every room? That's when they realize there must be a hidden room. In a walk-in closet upstairs, they discover a concealed door. Inside, they find Anya alive. The police arrive, take Anya to safety, and arrest both Ed and Simon, though the detective quietly congratulates Simon for the good work. Simon and Ed exchange a small smile while holding eye contact, something Simon was never able to do before. The end. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And until next time.